Good evening. I'm Dr. Randall Morgan, the President and CEO of the W. Montague Cobb NMA Health Institute. I also served as the 96th President of the National Medical Association. We are here this evening to present a webinar which is a collaboration between the National Medical Association, the Council on Environmental Health, the W. Montague Cobb NMA Health Institute, and blackdoctor.org. Today happens to be the 20th anniversary of the Hurricane Katrina disaster, which affected so many lives in the south and southwestern part of our United States. There was also significant impact on the African American community, and both the National Medical Association and the Cobb Institute worked assiduously after this occurred to attempt and make things better for all in our nation, and particularly those who were most affected in the Louisiana area. At this time, I would like to introduce the current president of the National Medical Association, Dr. Roger A. Mitchell, Jr., who is the president of the Howard University Hospital, as well as the president of the National Medical Association. And Dr. Mitchell will provide us with opening remarks. Dr. Mitchell.
Thank you, Dr. Morgan, and I want to thank the Cobb Institute along with blackdoctor.org for this partnership in bringing attention to the 20th year anniversary of Hurricane Katrina. The National Medical Association is the oldest and largest group of Black physicians in America. As we grapple with the attacks on Medicaid, the occupation of our nation's capital by our own National Guard, and the lack of retention and recruitment of diversity in medical education, environmental justice is no less important. So today, to commemorate the 20th year anniversary of Hurricane Katrina, this event deeply impacted New Orleans and the surrounding Louisiana community and exposed significant inequities in our healthcare systems, particularly affecting vulnerable communities. Katrina was a tragedy that highlighted the barriers that many residents, especially in marginalized groups, faced in accessing essential medical care. The existing health disparities were worsened, leaving disenfranchised individuals grappling not only with the destruction of their homes, but with inadequate health care resources. So this anniversary, 20 years later, prompts us to reflect on preventing such inequities in future disasters. We must address systemic barriers that disproportionately impact communities of color, especially in the light of the intersecting issues of environmental justice and public health. The effects of climate change exacerbate the vulnerabilities of underrepresented populations. The lessons from Hurricane Katrina should drive us to advocate for more equitable healthcare systems that guarantees access for everyone, irrespective of socioeconomic status. We need strategies that include the voices of those most affected to foster resilience. So as we honor those we've lost, to celebrate the resiliency of our family members, our cousins, our loved ones in the New Orleans and surrounding areas, let's commit to championing environmental justice, systemic change to protect our community from climate threats. So thank you for being here today. I look forward to the insights and discussions that we'll share throughout the remaining time we have. And God bless.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mitchell, for those very, very timely and important remarks. Our moderator for this evening is to be Dr. Doris Brown. Dr. Doris Brown is the Vice Chair of the Council on Environmental Health and Climate Change and the 118th President of the National Medical Association. Dr. Brown is currently having technical issues, and so we will proceed with our agenda, and hopefully Dr. Brown will join us momentarily. Our first speaker today is Dr. Marshala Lee McCall, and we will share the biographical information when we get to the discussion portion of our program today. But Dr. McCall will speak first by sharing a special poem after the storm, and following that, her remarks with regard to Katrina and its impact. Dr. Lee McCall.
Yes. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be with you today. It is indeed a solemn honor. And I've just been reflecting over these last few weeks about Hurricane Katrina. I was a pre-medical student in Mississippi, where I am a native of Mississippi, and oftentimes the impact of Hurricane Katrina in Mississippi is often overlooked. And so really, over the past few weeks, I've been reflecting on how little progress has been made and how vulnerable communities remain on the front lines. And I decided to put pen to paper and write this poem as both a remembrance of the lives lost and a charge for a more just and resilient future. The poem is entitled After the Storm. I remember the water, the never ending streams of water, how they swallowed streets, dreams, families, and communities up whole. Katrina's winds tore through the roofs, but it was the breach of promises that left the deepest wounds. Katrina just wasn't rain and wind. She was fueled by centuries of neglect, policies built on stand, and levees too weak to hold the weight of injustice. Today, the storms are stronger, the summer's hotter, the floods faster, and yet still, the most vulnerable communities are fighting for survival on the front lines. Climate change is not distant. It has a name, a face, a dark history. We cannot wait for the next siren. We must shore up the levees of justice, build policies as strong as our compassion, and make sure that no one is left standing on a rooftop calling for help that never comes. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. That was very, very powerful. I think all of us remember that time and remember our colleagues, many of whom were practicing medicine in New Orleans and the surrounding areas, who had to leave their practices if they were able. And many of them never were able to return to practice, including one of my own classmates in medical school. So, Dr. Lee McCall, would you give us more of your perspective on disaster preparedness tips for weathering the storm?
Yes, so greetings again. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm a family medicine physician and a 2025 Climate and Health Equity Fellow. And today I'll share some practical health-focused tips to help you and your family prepare before the disaster strikes. I do not have any disclosures. Next slide. During my presentation, we'll talk about why preparedness matters, how to identify the main hazards in your community, how to make a simple family plan, and how to start or strengthen your Go Kit and medication plan. My goal is that you leave here today ready to take at least one action step. Next slide. Hurricane Katrina taught us that disasters don't just destroy homes and neighborhoods. They also magnify existing health problems. When the power goes out and when it went out, people who needed insulin, oxygen, or refrigerated medicine were suddenly at risk. Flood waters and extreme heat worsen breathing issues and heart conditions, hitting vulnerable families the hardest. By being prepared, we can protect those with chronic illnesses, children, and older adults, and reduce the stress and suffering that so many endured during Katrina. Next slide. Knowing your local health threats is the foundation of disaster preparedness. In my area, flooding, heat waves, and power outages are the biggest threats. I recommend that you become familiar with your local threats, and you can do this by checking local emergency management weather agencies. They usually publish hazard profiles that show you flood zones, storm risk, and heat advisories. And you can also look at your state's hazard mitigation plan. It is typically published online. I also recommend signing up for local emergency alerts and keeping your phone set to receive wireless emergency alerts. If you use medical devices such as oxygen or your family members use oxygen, make sure that you're on your utilities medical priority list. Take out your phone today and sign up. This step takes minutes, but will save lives. Next slide. It is important that everyone develop a simple family disaster plan. Decide in advance, when do you shelter at home versus when do you evacuate? Pick two safe meeting spots, and I recommend that one is nearby your home and one is outside of your neighborhood. Create a communication plan where everyone texts first, since texts often go through when calls fail. Don't forget your pets, children, and elders. Write it down so in stressful moments, your disaster plan will be known and readily available, and no one has to guess. Next slide. You may have heard of a grab and go kit. It is a bag of essential supplies that's ready when disaster strikes, making sure you and your family can leave quickly and still have what you need to stay safe. Every household member needs a grab and go kit that lasts about 3 days. One of the most important items is water, and there should be 1 gallon of water per day per individual in the family. It should also include non-perishable foods, 7 to 14 days of medication, batteries, chargers, IDs, insurance cards, and cash. Cash and small bills is so very essential. Keep copies of prescriptions and documents in a waterproof bag. Remember to add comfort items, toys, foods for your pets. Think, what would I need if I couldn't get to a store for 3 days? Next slide. For those with chronic conditions, planning is very essential and critical. Keep an updated medication list. Ask your pharmacy about medication refills and ensure that it's available at a national pharmacy. For insulin or other medications that require refrigeration, know how long they last without power and make sure that you label them correctly. If you use oxygen or CPAP machines, plan for backup power. Store both paper and digital copies of all your health records, and do this for your family members as well. Next slide. Many of us have become super reliant upon technology, and I'm talking about myself. But when power goes out, none of these devices are effective. So it's very important that you keep your devices charged when the storm is coming, and have a car charger and a portable power bank handy. A battery or crank radio is still important if cell towers go down. Backup important files to the cloud and your USB drives. And remember, when phones die, paper still works. So in advance, write down key numbers and keep them in your to-go kit. Next slide. These are a few evacuation and shelter tips if you unfortunately have to utilize these resources. Know your evacuation routes, and don't wait until the last minute to leave. Please do not wait until the last minute to leave. Keep your gas tank at least half full during storm season. I recommend that for everyone throughout the year. If told to evacuate, bring your medications, chargers, and documents with you. That's why the to-go kit is so important. And if sheltering in place, pick the safest room at your house, away from windows, and protect important items from flooding. Next slide. For my pet lovers out there, such as myself, pets are family too. Make sure they have ID tags, and ideally they should be microchipped. Pack a go bag for them, which includes food, water, medications, and comfort items. Check with shelters and hotels to ensure that they're pet friendly in advance and that they will work for your family. Many shelters will not accept animals unless contained, so do your best to crate train them and always evacuate pets um, so that when conditions worsen, they won't be left behind. Next slide. Oftentimes, the danger doesn't just end when the storm passes. It oftentimes begins when returning home or worsens when you return home. Hidden risks like carbon monoxide poisoning from generators, contaminated water, or electric shocks from damaged wiring can be just as deadly as the disaster itself. Never drive during flood waters. Use generators outside, from windows. As I mentioned, carbon monoxide kills silently. Refrigerated food that sits without power for more than 4 hours should be thrown out. And always follow boil water advisories. Safety comes first, even after the storm passes. Next slide. Disasters are stressful, and it's very normal to feel anxious or overwhelmed. It's important that you check in with your loved ones, neighbors, especially elders, and people with disabilities. Community support, faith groups, local organizations often mobilize quickly. Don't be afraid to ask for help, and remember to take care of your mental health as much as your physical health. Next slide. Preparedness doesn't have to be overwhelming. Today, I want you to take some steps forward. Sign up for alerts and pick out an area for contact. Tomorrow, consider writing a one-page family plan. This week, update your go kit and medication list and check your smoke and carbon monoxide detectors. Small steps add up to major protection. Next slide. These are a few trusted resources for emergency preparedness: ready.gov, Red Cross, CDC, and your local emergency management agency. And don't forget, your primary care provider can review your medications and help you plan for emergencies. Next slide. Thank you for your attention. Preparedness is not just about protecting your health, your family, and your community. Please feel free to contact me via my website, thesickandtired.com. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Lee McCall. And that's wonderful information. And we're going to make sure that this information is available to everyone who is taking part in this webinar this evening. Now, I think our moderator has come back. And so, Dr. Brown, are you ready to take the baton?
Thank you so much for continuing. We talked about preparedness and everything was prepared, and then all of a sudden, technology, my sound went off. Anyway, the disaster has been passed, and so we'll now move to our next speaker. And I should say that each of the speakers can give more information about themselves. I will just say Dr. Cheryl Holder is a physician, an educator, a climate health advocate, dedicated to improving health and understand in underserved communities. And she has such a wealth of information and knowledge, and co-founded, I should say, the Florida Clinicians for Climate Action. And she has also served as a co-chair of the Miami-Dade Heat Health Task Force. And so I will let you give some additional information on that before we go on to give your presentation. Dr. Holder.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for having me in such an important day. And my topic is on an unrecognized emergency, because Katrina opened our eyes so widely to what affects our community and what could be underlying and what's happening that will predict what will happen in our future. I wanted to present my slides, but I check share slides and it's, oh,
There you
got it.
go.
Okay. So Asia, I guess you will change it because I can't. If you could get to the next slide. This patient, 11 years after Katrina, 2016, she comes into my office wanting a refill. You see multiple medical problems, multiple medications, short of breath, hot, worsening asthma, worsening everything, and couldn't pay her light bill. She started to, the next slide, please. She brought together a whole series of dots that I started connect where the heat was just increasing. And she kept telling me at nights it was too hot. She couldn't sleep. What was going on? And she really couldn't continue this way. Keep going. Just keep going. And when I started looking back, and we put this out here, that this is not something that happened now. Just like Katrina, heat is not, the hurricane didn't just happen and all of the disaster came. Things were building up. The levees weren't there. The society had not been invested in fully. So in case of heat, similar. 250 years, we've been gradually polluting our environment and seeing our temperature rise. That long-term pattern, that weather pattern change over time is what we then said the climate has changed because we saw something happening very differently than what used to happen before. Next slide. And even more, we see it as we see that the weather inching up slowly. And as we get closer in the 2021, 22, 25, we see the persistent increase in heat. Next. And you've seen this before. If there anybody who's ever heard of climate change, all our gases, because we produced all that burning coal, oil, and fossil fuels to push our wonderful society that we have, that some people have been able to have cars and trains and automobiles and air conditioning and everything, but we've paid a price. We've paid a price by polluting our planet and trapping that heat energy on our planet, which then warms the planet, warms the ocean, evaporation more, seeding the clouds, and changing our weather, and especially heat. Next. And heat is particularly worse, and I use this, that when we feel heat, once a humidity, which is increasing as our planet warms up our ocean, especially Louisiana, California, all the Gulfs and the Gulf states, not California, Louisiana, Mississippi, Florida, all the Gulf states, that humidity drives that heat, feel like temperatures where it's even more risky. Next slide. And by 2019, we know now that heat is the #1 weather-related killer. Heat, next slide. If you look at what FEMA responds to, it is not declared a national emergency heat. Right now, declarations are only for natural phenomena like hurricane, tropical storms, tornadoes, wildfires, ice storms, or man-made disasters like fires, dam levee failure, like what we saw at Katrina, or biological emergencies. But heat, which is the #1 weather-related killer and is gradually worsening on our existence every year, impacting our health, is not declared an emergency, but is still the #1 weather-related killer. So we know that there is no response coming from FEMA because of heat. Similar to again with Katrina, where the response was late. Here we know definitely there will be no response unless we are prepared. Next slide. So when we look at heat, we know that our body has got to maintain that homeostasis, that manage that number right around 37, 36, 37 in that area. So what do we have to do to maintain it? We are two types of ways that we generate our own heat. Heat is just basically the molecules in our body moving. And as everything moves, and you remember in your basic physics, energy is never destroyed. Energy is transformed. So if the sun's energy and the photons come down on us and we move and they create the molecular movement, and we're constantly generating our heat. Once we get to a certain stage and we cannot control and manage the heat, we end up with complications. Next slide. I tell everybody with this book, The Heat Will Kill You First, Jeff Goodell. He talks it so well. He says that the first thing to be able to control your body is to sweat. We sweat to be able to create the fluid, which then evaporates. But to sweat, your blood vessels got to dilate. It has to move as much blood out to the skin as possible because our skin senses it first. And if you can't cool off, the body will continually try and sweat and pump the blood and move it. And eventually, if you do not maintain the cooling, you will see worse complications. And again, that's why we see so many problems from heat. Next slide. This is for the doctors, and you'll get it later. It just shows how integrated heat management is. That thermoregulatory system requires your nervous system, your cardiovascular system, your renal system. Those are the kidneys. Everything has to work together to create the releases of hormones and messengers throughout the body so you can maintain that balance. When that fails, we will keep going. The next 2 slides, please. Those are the sweat glands have got to work. Next slide. Keep going. Next slide. And if it doesn't work, your body then creates a whole response, similar to how COVID, where bodies puts out a whole inflammatory reaction, the muscles shut down, the circulation shuts down, and the whole body starts to basically denature and die. Next slide. Keep going. Keep going. So when we look at heat, we have 2 main ways that we generate the heat. If you're physically moving like athletes and outdoor workers, you're making your own internal heat. But if you're just elderly or a baby and you're in this very hot weather, especially humid, the outside heat will increase the reaction. So we have the mild response and the severe response. So we really have to have an understanding that when your body is going through all these physiologic changes to maintain that homeostasis, you're going to start see changes that telling your body that it's not keeping up. So immediately when your skin gets all that heat, everybody gets a little prickly rash. That's one of the first signs that your body is reacting to the excess heat. And then eventually, as you try to sweat and you can't get the circulation to the muscles as much, you get muscle cramps. You also don't get the circulation to the stomach, and you start getting nausea and vomiting, and the circulation to the brain, and you may get dizziness. When we get to the point where you really have the nerves of the brain start having headaches and dizziness, and you're not clear, that tells you your internal temperatures are high, your circulation is not keeping up, and that's our major red flag. Next slide. Next slide, yeah. And this is when we talk about heat stroke. And when I tell everybody it's an emergency, 911, 911. I take time in this presentation that folks don't understand the severity of heat stroke, that you gotta call 911. It's almost like a heart attack. And that's why we lose so many people, because they think they're just getting hot. They think they can just cool down, but the body really cannot manage heat to a certain point, and you got to call for help. Next slide. When we look at the heat, when we see the dangers, it is much more that we see these strokes when the humidity and the heat combined. So that's why, again, where you look, where especially the vulnerable populations, and I have to say where the Black population live, which is primarily in the South, near the Gulf Coast, near a lot of humidity, you will see a higher risk of low wealth people having the impact from heat. Outdoor workers, elderly, athletes, any area with heat and humidity will be at risk. Again, that's why we consider what happened in Louisiana. If another storm comes through as severe as Katrina, now with the warming planet, with the tremendous heat that we're experiencing post the storm, we could see a lot more deaths than we had before because heat has worsened in the last 20 years. It's now at this tremendous level that we know a large number of people will be impacted. Next. Again, with the health risk, when you feel like 80s and 90s and your body is moving, you're going to have a high risk of having complications from heat. And the higher and the hotter it gets and the more humid it gets, the more likely you will go down. Next slide. These are the vulnerable groups. I just give you pictures because at the end you will know when we talk about vulnerable groups. Elderly, children, athletes, poor people. Next slide. Chronic diseases. Next. Children. I'm sorry, go back to children. Next, go back, please. Now go back. One thing about children, you'll hear all the physiological differences between children and adults, but the main reason that children go down with heat is the adults have not supervised. Adult supervision is key to keeping children alive. What happens, children will avoid and not recognize any of the signs and symptoms that I just went through, but it has to be the adult that will bring them in to say, stop, let's come in, gets hydrated, or no, don't go out and play. That's what will save children. Next slide. Athletes, the same thing. The adults who supervise athletes have got to recognize why they have so many heat-related issues, and because they will continue to play through their symptoms, and especially football players that have an additional layer of clothes and hats and just wear that will make evaporation and cooling harder. Next slide. Next. This is really important. Increase in the last decade, 170% increase in heat-related illnesses. This is since Katrina. Not only are we looking at hurricane, but post-hurricane, we're going to have heat complications. Without the hurricane, heat is a major risk factor for children, for adults, for vulnerable populations. Next. Medications. You heard about protecting your medications. Heat impacts the thermoregulation is impacted by many classes of drugs. And this, again, if you look at our population since Katrina, our US population has aged. We've also developed more chronic disease, more diabetes, more high blood pressure, more complications. So a large percentage of the population are now on medications that affects the thermoregulation and again increase the risk of heat-related complications. Next. This is just another way of looking at it. Cardiovascular, thermoregulatory. Next. You look again, by the time we're done, I like to do things 3 times. You will not forget chronic disease, vulnerable, no cooling, medications, outdoor workers, housing problems, policies. Heat is a major emergency. Next. A threat multiplier. Next. I bring you tools because as you can see, it is not going to be on FEMA's list of response. Our communities now need heat plans. Individually, we need heat plans. Just as you saw your disaster plan, put the heat plan in. Where are your cooling centers? Do you have extra water? Do you have at least $50 somewhere in case you need somebody to go buy some water for you? How are you going to stay cool? That has to be part of the consideration when we look at every disaster that's now happening in the US. Next. Thank you. That's a real patient. He lived in concrete, on concrete, with very little shade. His kidneys were going. Heat is a major and is the number one weather-related killer. It's an emergency that's happening now and will complicate every emergency, every disaster in the future. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Holder. Now we'll go to our last speaker, and I want to give a few minutes that we can answer some questions. So Dr. Alfred Glover is a former Climate Health Equity Fellow, as well as a policy experience in equity with climate and health, affiliated with the Meharry School of Medicine of Global Health, as well as George Mason University. He has been a member of the Climate Task Force in the state of California, and he is a working podiatrist in the state, and he is going to speak with us about the wildfires, especially Altadena. Dr. Glover.
Thank you so much, Dr. Brown, and thank the other presenters for giving some really real-time factual information that I think we can use in every disaster. But I'm going to talk about after the LA fires, the disaster and gentrification looming. In the aftermath of the Eaton fires, Black residents in Altadena, California, worried about developers swooping in and displacing residents. I live and practice in the Los Angeles area, and I also had a satellite practice in Altadena that was overcome, and of course we lost the practice. But what has happened during this time, and because of climate change, as we talked about, we had an event that was so earth-shattering to our community. The fires were devastating, and it impacted on our historically Black community of Altadena just disproportionately. A little historical perspective. This enclave is a stronghold of Black middle-class, resilient, generational wealth families that had a profound loss. We lost over 1,000 structures and homes during this incredible event. The fires obliterated everything that we had. And not only did we lose structures, we lost lives. The impact of the Eden fire to the Altadena community was historic. Remember, this community goes back to the time of the Civil War, when African Americans came to Los Angeles and they couldn't find a place to live. And they found this little enclave. And to this day, until the fires, there was an 81.5% home ownership. And this was 4 and 5 generations of African Americans that had these homes. One of the things that we want to talk about, not only with Katrina and other historic disasters that has affected our communities, is the psychological and financial toll that it's taken. And then the disaster on top of that is gentrification. This is when developers come in, and we've seen that here, unfortunately, over half of the African American homes that were burned down, families decided to sell at a fire sale rate. This is a tragedy. It is compounded because generations of young African Americans will not be able to have homes. They can't afford them. The other thing that is impacting not only our community, but all communities, is that the insurances, FEMA does not cover what it should. And now people who relied on State Farm and other insurances, and even our state coverage, were left in the lurch with not the appropriate amount of reimbursement, so they would be able to have the ability to rebuild their properties. These disasters are magnified, as Dr. Holder and Dr. McCall have stated, by climate change. These inequity challenges or distance that we're put from others in our communities of color are exacerbated. This is a real problem, and especially in these times where this administration has really turned their backs on most Americans, especially Americans who are in communities of color. But despite the devastation, our community has mobilized. And this is what we have to do in all communities, in all disasters. I'm part of what we call the Green Health Bank of African American churches. We've had fundraisers, we've done GoFundMes, and we've actually leaned on philanthropy and others within the state to try to make some of these families whole. But we've fallen far short of being able to take care of everyone. The other thing that is not talked about with these disasters, besides the psychological problems, are the health impacts. These fires, not only because of the particulate matter and all of the other toxic chemicals, have given individuals in the community and in the Los Angeles County as a whole all types of respiratory, cardiovascular, and renal problems because of their exposure. The emotional and cultural loss of these fires has just been devastating. And there's a term called solastalgia, which is grief over environmental destruction. We saw it in Katrina, where we saw thousands of African Americans displaced from their homes. They were nomads, and they were not able to really get back to their physical home. What we're talking about and what I want to talk about is really setting forth real policy measures started by the National Medical Association and then with our legislators to really make sure that we advocate for more protections for our communities and all communities. This solastalgia, this incredible environmental and not only physical but emotional loss that our communities have, we need to address that, because it's not just a disaster, but it's years later. Will these families be able to recover? So that's the challenge. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And before I start with a few questions, I really wanted to bring home the points of what all of our speakers have spoken about today. And you've heard about the planet getting warmer, the ocean expanding, sea level rising, and you end up with flooding in some areas and droughts in the other. And it's really becoming very intense and frequently. And you get the heat waves and the hurricanes. And we are at the peak almost of the hurricane season, and it is going to get worse in the next few days. We know that climate change that's caused by the pollutants, the greenhouse gases that are coming into the atmosphere from vehicles, power plants, and other kinds of exhausters, and we are experiencing those more intensely every day, and it's going to get worse. I read an article not long ago that was published in The Guardian a few years ago. And the impact of all of the things that we are speaking about is really about the disproportionate impact that this has upon people of color. And this article spoke about to be a person of color in America often means that you are unseen and unheard. And in reference to climate change, it means that taking on the burden of the disproportionate impact from all of these pollutions in the air, the health effects of climate change, environmental injustices, I'll have to bring that in, the other disparities that we have, lack of health care, lack of access to health care when we have a disaster, and much, much more, really is one of the reasons that our people are dying more from the impact of climate change. And this brings me to a thought about Ralph Ellison, who the writer, that stated, "I am invisible," simply because people refuse to see me. So on this 20th anniversary of Katrina, which was the worst disaster in my lifetime that I've experienced, the question is, when will America finally acknowledge the toll that structural inequities take on communities of color, those that have low wealth, and the indigenous people? Organizations like the National Medical Association and the W. Montague Cobb Institute, activists, and others on the front line of environmental justice must continue to plead with our policymakers and our politicians to address the public health impact of pollution in our disadvantaged community. But we know all too well that the toxins that are spewed into the air are coming from the industrial runoffs, the exhaust from all of the vehicles and other sources, the particulate matters that are there. It's shortening the lives of many of us, brown and black people. But are they listening? Probably rarely. So it behooves us to take charge ourselves, to become an activist, to make sure that you are going to have a safe environment where you can have clean water, breathe air that's not going to lead to the pollutants. And most of us don't think about, and you heard in the presentations, that the impact is really difficult for the elderly, for the pregnant women, for the children, and those with chronic conditions, including cancer. And so when we look at all of those problems that's there, some people will say, well, it's not that bad. But in the last year, there were 27 climate disasters in the United States, and it resulted in $1 billion in damages. And you've heard in terms of Altadena and the climate, many of those families will not be able to come back and build in that community because they can't afford it. But it's not just that we destroyed the properties, we also destroyed the access to healthcare, because if your community is impacted, your children can't go to school. They have, again, it's not the physical damage, but also the mental health damages. And then access to healthcare, because many times the clinics are not able to function. They've been damaged by the disasters that's there. And so all of this taken together, we have to take a stand. So now I'm going to ask my panelists a few little questions, and then I have to be cognizant of our time to make sure that we do have some time. So, Dr. Lee McCall, if you look back on 20 years of Katrina, what lessons stand out to you on how we can protect our vulnerable communities from another disaster that's coming down? And keep in mind that, I'd hate to bring this up, but I don't think we have a functioning governmental agencies that's going to be present to help us to get through this. So looking at it from 20 years ago.
Yes, so Katrina really taught us the lesson of that we have to be our sister and brother's keeper, and that we cannot rely upon the government and others to be there for our communities. And some of this we were able to put into action during COVID. My husband and I, we actually went to the store and bought a megaphone. And we knew that a lot of people don't watch the news. We take it for granted that people have access to the information that's out there. So really being a voice and a megaphone, ensuring that people know what the risks that are coming up. Working with our neighbors, we know that many people don't have access to transportation. People will walk into the store. And so how can we expect those same people to be able to evacuate? So really being there for our community members, we being our brothers and sisters keeper, that is what it really taught us, is that we can not function in the island by ourselves, and that we have to be proactive and support the vulnerable among us and make sure that they have the resources and the tools that are needed to evacuate or to address the same. And so that's some of what I learned since Katrina.
Thank you. Dr. Holder, when we look at the social determinants of health, and you spoke about many of the things that's there and how we're going to get back to building up and looking at the impact that climate has, can you address the intersection of climate vulnerability with the social determinants of health?
Well, every health outcome is determined from your social determinants of health. And I tell folks, you break it simply: where you live, where you work, where you play, your access to money and power, because that's what drives the policies. So we are clear, it's very clear on what policies are being put in place, what have been in place, and where we are and why our health comes are what they are. And we can take it back to 1619, when that first policy that came down that chose people from a certain geographic area to enslave them to drive your businesses so you had no labor cost. That's like the one way to definitely make a profit if you have no labor cost. But that created the cascading effects that we see now to Hurricane Katrina, to Altadena, in that the devaluation of certain people have led to being at the bottom and not having the economic power. When you look at dollars, it drives it. The median income of African Americans in 2022 or 2023 is around 50 something thousand. So you're already looking at a group of folks who cannot afford to, as much as we want, pull ourselves up and do it on our own. It's just not a lot of money out there. So we have to leverage allies. We have to leverage our local power, because I think it's clear that the national power will not support it. There's no ambulance coming from FEMA. There's no ambulance coming from your hospitals, because your hospitals probably won't even be there. So how do you leverage the power? And we are talking about the neighbors, but actually community, and I hear it so well, community is currency. So how do we drive our community to coalesce, collaborate, and vote? I mean, we're going to do everything to help each other, but if we can, we've got to get every living person out there to vote and show up at rates, I don't care what blocks there are, to pull that community together. Because at $50,000, it's very hard to provide the type of infrastructure you need and recovery you need. And we pay so much taxes, so we got to leverage those tax dollars. But you cannot separate poverty from money and power in how you're going to get the policies to drive how you live. Because now they're putting in data centers, which is a huge amount of pollution in low wealth Black communities. So no matter how hard you try, that is just killing your health. So we really need to leverage the community power to protect as much as we can. I like doctors and nurses and clinicians to use their voices to prepare and protect the patients. So I think there's so many avenues we can go to leverage that community and get that community power.
Thank you. And talking about leveraging that power, Dr. Glover, you talked about communities and leveraging them. So how can we better engage our trusted communities, community leaders and organizations to really get in and get prepared for disasters that's going to come, and take an active role in advocating for change in terms of all of the negative things with climate change?
Well, I know what we've done here in Los Angeles. We started with our trusted communities, our faith-based communities, and then of course our established African American and Latinx organizations such as fraternities and sororities. What we did was we got in touch with our Black-owned newspaper. We did a pretty much an immediate summit that we brought all of these power brokers together, along with the individuals that were affected, and we had to come up with a strategy. We were able to elicit um, two of the three Black-owned banks here in California to make a commitment to provide loans at a reduced interest, and then we collectively started a emergency fund for not only the individuals in Altadena, but our communities at large, because we know that this is not going to be the last catastrophe. We know that heat's coming. We know that drought's coming. We know that other climate events or other natural disasters will come. So we've had to come to terms that no one is, as Dr. Holder said, the cavalry's not coming. We can no longer depend on the federal government. Our state government, although willing, has been hampered because the federal government controls their funding. So we have started an ongoing fund that each church is doing separate offerings each Sunday that will be earmarked for our disaster victims, and other organizations are doing other things to try to harness this. Is it enough? No, but it has done some things that I think has helped. One of the things that was remarkable is we do still have a lot of Black ownership of property and homes. And one of the things that we were able to do, we were able to find housing for individuals that did not have housing at reduced rents, and in some cases until individuals got themselves together, no rents. So that was big because we have one of the most egregious homeless tragedies in America. So we did not want to add to that. So those are the things that we've been doing.
Thank you so much. And I want to thank all of our panelists. I want to certainly thank Dr. Morgan, who always steps in and takes charge whenever there's an issue. But the sponsors there, like the W. Montague Cobb, the National Medical Association Council on Environmental Health and Climate Change, and blackdoctors.org, we certainly appreciate all of their help. And as we're coming to an end, I think things that we as the public hold dear is being threatened: our democracy, our civility, and truth. So we must take action and urge our government, that is, in terms of climate, it's going to be EPA, to fulfill its mission to protect public health and the environment. So strongly we encourage you at whatever level, local, national, state, to those elected officials that you put in, be held accountable, and they must follow the science. Truth is being chased away. Science and scientists are being cleared out of their administrative leadership, but we must hold fast to make sure that science is still involved and that the public health is protected. Thank you all for listening, and I know that our time is up. The references that we have there, we will have available, and you can obtain them by sending a note, whether it is to the National Medical Association Council on Environmental Health and Climate Justice, that we will have this available to share with those that are there. Or it may be also on the W. Montague Cobb website. I want to also thank our president of the National Medical Association, because one of his pillars will be addressing environmental and climate change. Thank you all and have a very good evening.